Welcome to the Pineapple Perspective with Troy Hooper, sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. I'm excited to have a uniquely different guest from our previous guests thus far on the series because we've talked to a lot of operators and brand folks of recent. And we're going to get into the service side, the vendor supply side of the business in regards to a SaaS product, a service partner business in the Landed company. So we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end, but a little bit different perspective. Somebody who's working with a lot of brands gets to be on the inside of a lot of brands' conversations about their labor challenges and things. So I think we're going to get some unique and different conversation. Let me introduce you to Rouhaan from Landed. Hi, Rouhaan. How are you?
I'm good, Troy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Really excited to have you on. And full disclosure, you'll see me promoting in the near future my appearance on Rouhaan's show, Fast Casual. So we just recorded that. And so don't be surprised when we're both cross-promoting our own
We
shows.
we
Don't
should
get
change
confused.
shirts. We should change
Yeah,
shirts for this.
we should have
Just
changed shirts. For the YouTube watchers, a lot of people might just listen and not realize we're wearing the same thing. We're in the same
uh-huh.
position. That's okay. But I was honored to be on your show, and I look forward to that coming out. And glad to have you, Rouhaan. Welcome. And let's get started with the following. We always start this conversation around the thesis that every business is in the hospitality business. Not just that every business is in the people business, but every business has the opportunity truly to be in the hospitality business. And you run and work with your team at Landed on basically a SaaS product, a service-based technology platform. And so some people in your role and in your company might not really consider themselves being in the hospitality business, but we think that you have an opportunity to be in the hospitality business. So let me ask you first what your thesis is on what is hospitality mean to you?
That's a fun question. I think fundamentally, right, and I agree, right, we all are in the hospitality business because, either you're selling, you're servicing, whatever you're doing, you need to make your stakeholders feel cared for, right, feel welcome, right? So it's not only the customers, right? It's your employees, it's your colleagues, it's your guests, it's your investors. I think it's just a fundamental on the fabric of society. That's also one of the reasons why when Landed started out, we could have done it for any industry that's forward facing, like retail and warehousing. But because everyone in our company has come in, you know, I was the kid serving chicken tikka masala at your local Indian restaurant. So, we all come in working restaurants and we enjoy it. So I think hospitality is a core value for us.
Awesome. You said care and welcome. You said something I thought was really important, which was all of the stakeholders. You thought equally about employees and customers and vendor partners, et cetera. Where did you get this thesis? Where do you come from that gives you this belief around how you see hospitality in your business? What's the origin story for how Rouhaan developed his beliefs of hospitality?
As cliched as this sounds, I think it comes down from like my mother, right? I grew up in a house where I had three other siblings. My family has been in business for three generations, and I got my first job when I was 9 years old. So the just the fact that you need to you learn how you want to be treated. When you know how you want to be treated, you learn how you want to treat others, right? I still remember the first time I got a tip. It was a $10 tip, and you understand the value of $10 back in the day, right? Uh,
Yeah,
it, and
that's a big tip.
it was it changed my life. And all the gentleman told me was keep smiling, right? And it's funny, and I think this is the first time that I'm talking about this out loud. And it also talks about how we need to, it's a controversial topic, but tipping in our industries is something which gets a lot of coverage anyway. But it sort of changed the way that I looked at just working, at being treated and treating people. So I think it comes in from my mother, and just because I got an early start working.
That's amazing. I think many of us have that similar experience, right? My father was an entrepreneur, and I grew up in his construction businesses. Coincidentally, he constructed bars, nightclubs, and restaurants,
Yeah.
renovated, reconceptualized, or new build as a big part of his business. And so that's how I came to understand the business. But he also liked to throw a great party. In the 70s and 80s, you had a house party. That's what you did. And all my birthdays were a big house party with my neighbor as the DJ and all that kind of thing. And so I just grew up welcoming people, throwing a party, catering, right? Doing the ham and cheese and cracker plates of the 80s, which are not the charcuterie boards of today, I can tell you. But yeah, it's just sort of seeing how they treat their customers, how they treat their employees, how I was expected to behave and treat others in his business, and guests, what welcoming guests to your home and throwing a party, or when you go to somebody's home, bringing food to share and bringing beverage to share, and just that entire mindset, was ingrained in me as well. And no surprise, my first job was a busboy, right, at a casual, fast-paced restaurant. So I think those of us that have that great privilege of being raised that way or exposed that way or having those first jobs that way, it makes it pretty easy. But not everybody at the landed company grew up in hospitality necessarily, right? And so, how do you translate that mindset to your employees, your colleagues, your coworkers, your leadership group? How do you help facilitate and weave hospitality into the fabric of your SaaS company?
Right. So I think one of our principles is customer delight, right? So I'm gonna break it up into like a couple of ways, right? So let's start off with the customer. Now, there are a few touch points on our side where we talk to the customer, right? So it's during client check-ins, client strategy meetings, sales process. The entire process is built around understanding the customer's business, right? So what does cash flow look like to you guys? What are AUVs? These are not typically questions that vendors get into, especially if you're just like looking at the hiring side of the business. But we want to understand your business well so that we can help you, forecast down the road what you're looking for. So it's about preempting what your customers will need and being there to help them with a smile or having service ready for them, right? Let's look at it from an investor's perspective. And we want to ensure that our investors have all the right information, have all their updates. We are completely know what's going on the business, right? It's about over communicating with them. Same thing with our vendors and with the rest of the employees. We think that transparency and over communicating with everyone, taking questions, answering hard questions, making sure that everyone feels they're a part of a larger mission, help us in that process. So I think every group within the stakeholders have different ways that hospitality needs to be communicated, but fundamentally, it's just making people feel like they belong and feel happy when they show up to where they want to show up.
Yeah, no matter what business, right?
Yeah,
SaaS
exactly.
business, coding developer, or
Yeah,
a salesperson, right?
yeah. Interesting story. The entire company, we were in Cartagena, in Colombia, about 4 weeks ago for a company offsite. And sometimes you're far removed from the world of coding. And we had this really fun thing where we split off into different groups, and solve for different problems. A lot of things that come out, we call it a hackathon, right? So 48 hours, you're just building a product and you push it into staging. A lot of products that we actually use today came just from those hackathons, and they're like the backbone of our company today. Apart from helping you build great products, what it also does is it brings that camaraderie, that warmth, that happiness, that feeling of building for that cause together, and helps bring in some of that hospitality magic within an organization.
Well, that's pretty cool. It's unique, and maybe not doesn't need to be unique in your business, but the fact that you can do that, it's like going and doing a team building exercise, but there's real world business results that everybody can be proud of at the end of the hackathon, right?
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
it's like, oh, we all did an offsite and we had some fun, but at the end of the day, we actually got real things done that really matter to our business. And we all can feel a sense of pride and accomplishment as a result of that, not just we played pickleball, right? And
which
I got the trophy,
yeah,
you know.
I would have sucked at
Yeah.
pickleball, but yeah,
Which
thank God.
everybody should play pickleball.
I want to get there.
Well, that's a really great demonstration of the answer to the question. That's pretty phenomenal. Let's talk about your customer at Landed, where you help, and we'll get into more details later, but where you basically help brands establish and secure labor force, right, and get the right kind of labor into their building, help their franchisees, their corporate stores, etc. Um, that's a high touch point, right? That's an important touch point in our business. Who we hire is critically important to our customer experience, our customer journey, the end results of our business, from many perspectives. And so it's a really, really important job, right? It's a really important aspect of, and to outsource that to you is a high trust factor. What are the multi-brand operations, whether corporate or franchise model, what are they saying to you today? Let's get real specific to July 2024 at the moment. What are they saying to you today is the highest challenge? What are they really focused on now as their concern graph for when they think about who they're going to hire, how many they're going to hire, where they're going to find them, how they're going to keep them, things like that? What are the top 2 or 3 things that are top of mind to brands today?
The reason that the brands find us, right, either multi-unit operators or franchisees or franchisors, is so just to give you context. Today, on an average, an hourly worker applies to 14 jobs in one sitting.
Wow.
1 out of 3 accept the first job they're offered. The thing
They're
is,
just looking to solve their problem, right? Which is, I need a job. I need
job,
one now.
right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, if someone is going in and applying for 14 jobs, our GMs do not have the time for like outreach. And the biggest problem that the industry faces today is ghosting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting quality candidates to show up for the interviews. So to answer your question specifically, right? If you go back about 6 months, right, before inflation was sitting in, my answer would have been different. My answer would have been the quantity of applicants coming in. But today, as of this month, the largest problem is quality and then ghosting, followed by like quantity of applicants. So it's changed a lot in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and the ghosting thing is they apply to 14 jobs. 3 people reach out within minutes to a couple of hours. They have an interview the same day, possibly, and they get offered a job the same day or the next day. It's like before you even get through the list, review the resumes, send the email or the text or the call, they've probably already been through 2 or 3 interviews and been hired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The thing is, we can't also be too hard on our GMs. They've they have to take care of curbside. They've got third party. They've got customer service. They've got to maintain food costs. How much can we load onto them? Right. So that's where it is. I mean, yes, it is a large problem, but you can't expect your GMs to solve it for you today.
So for brands that you see are doing it well, and don't say the answers because they're using Landed, but the brands that you see doing it well, what are the other elements besides using you or even a service like you or other systems or processes that they find? What are you seeing when you're going through their processes and seeing them have success? What are some of the other variables that contribute to their having an edge or an advantage over most of the rest of us?
I would say hands down, existing employee NPS. So if your existing employees are happy, you're going to see high referrals from them, right? If you incentivize your existing employees, $100 signing referral bonus, you're going to see high referrals. And what ends up happening is, statistically, we've seen that restaurants for concepts where candidates that come in through referrals have a 30 to 35% higher retention rate than candidates that don't come in through referrals, right? Which essentially goes to 2 points, right? One is you're being referred because they're happy, and then they're sticking around, and then they're bringing in more family and friends. So outside using technology, I think that it comes down to the culture and the values, the ways you pay within the brand. So there are multiple data points. So culture, how close is the nearest bus stop? We work with, some really competitive concepts, and there are two concepts on either side of the road. There's one concept, there's one location that gets 40% higher application volume just because it's closer to the bus stop, right? So
Wow.
there, there are multiple data points that go into it, right? But by and large, the most important one to your question is current employee happiness.
That's amazing. What I love about your stats is that they're stats, like they're data. They're not like anecdotal. This is what we've seen work, and we know generally makes sense for most companies. Like you're really sharing some really specific data that says this is still what works. If you thought this was your philosophy before, you're probably aligned with that and understand that and probably seeing better results. And if you're not, hopefully you're hearing it again for the 10th time to say, look, this is what works. Like, and quite frankly, I think the reality is most people, like you say, most brands, whether it's corporate or otherwise, they hire at the store level, totally localized, right? That GM's responsible for posting, that job posting responsible for responding. Like you said, how scalable is that? How consistent is that? This GM's performance and the next GM and the next GM and the next GM, they're all going to do it differently. They're going to have different priorities. They're going to have different ways, whether it's systems or personality or process. And that inconsistency is what leads to sort of that inconsistent challenge that some stores have a greater disparate delta between their performance and other stores that are performing better. When you say, why is this store doing better than my other stores? Usually you can look at that GM and you can look at systems and processes and culture and how they do what they do, right? That they really actually put in the time and the effort and creativity to this particular task or most or any other task.
To that point, right? Like, if you think about all the brands or the franchisor concepts that you've seen scale on the people side of things, you will see that they have something which is constant, right? They've set up great training SOPs. So it's the same candidate hiring experience at location A or location B, right? Now with technology, that can be outsourced. So even with younger brands going in, if you have technology doing that for you, it can standardize that process and also give you multiple input points of data for you to know what's working, what's not working, what can be fixed.
I think that's critical to optimizing your system and your process and saving time at the end of the day and saving a whole lot of aggravation. It's a very frustrating process when it's not going well for you. It's taking more time. You're not getting the candidates you really want, or you're spinning your wheels, right? They're not showing up for the interviews. They're not calling back, or et cetera. There's something about your process that's not resonating that somebody else's is, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so figuring out from somebody like you what's really working more consistently across the system certainly can give people an advantage to doing a better job. Are there any other trends? You sort of highlighted a couple of things in that conversation, but are there any other trends in the hiring process that you're seeing as things are evolving, again, with the use of technology or adjacent to the use of technology?
One thing that we're seeing, I mean, retention is a large part of the hourly workforce's biggest, focus areas for this year, right?
Yeah.
You know, it, on an average, it costs a restaurant about $70,000 a year, just in terms of spending amount of time and money on retention. One thing that we've seen and is, I think Josh calls it the golden period, right? The first 90 days in a restaurant. That is the most, there's a 47% probability of that employee staying for a year if he crosses 90 days. So, what are we doing for our team members to, help them stay on for that 90-day period, right? If you're gonna, over today, about 70% of the workforce is millennial, is Gen Z. are you going to hand a 40-page binder on training, or are you going to
Right.
make, short, not even long form content, right? Short form content for them to ingest. What are we doing as brands and operators to make sure and to speak the same language
Right.
as the folks that we're hiring, right? Like, look at you. I mean, you're on TikTok, you're on every platform, and you speak and you're relatable, right? But you're one of the few who are ahead of the curve.
I know a lot of operators, a lot of franchisees, a lot of brands out there. This is still not the highest focus, right? It's still not understanding that how you do anything is how you do everything, or how you do everything is how you do anything. Like how you onboard somebody, how you instill the pride, the values of the brand, the enthusiasm for the brand, for the importance of every task, no matter what that task is, how unglamorous it might be, that it contributes to the totality of the success of the company, and therefore contributes to their success as an employee, and their ability to have that job. I just don't think that we're, as an industry, still really focused on putting in the time and effort and money that is required there. And some brands are. You referenced Josh. You were referencing Josh Halpern of Big Chicken, who I recently saw on stage in Chicago, talking about this, talking about some of the solutions like yours that he uses, and why those solutions matter and what they do for their business to give them that advantage, whether it's onboarding, hiring and onboarding like yours, training with Opus, gamifying communication, etc. Like you said, Gen Z is the workforce, and we're what, 3 or 4 years, 5 years away from Alpha,
Pretty much.
and if you think Gen Z is demanding,
Uh-huh.
Gen Z's workforce thesis is, what are you doing to invest in me? What am I getting out of this as the employee? What am I taking away from this when I leave here that I'm better for the next job, right? It's flipped the script completely.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so,
You
yeah,
you hit
having
it
that
nail on the
mindset,
head.
of understanding that they find jobs differently, they apply for jobs differently, they take jobs differently, they have higher and different expectations for the onboarding and brand affiliation process. They generally want to have an affinity for the brand, whether it's a retail or a service or restaurant or whatever. They generally want to have excitement for the brand. Usually they know the brand, right? And like, to your point, if you have happy employees, they're probably going to invite like-minded, happier people that want to work there because they already know the brand and they've been given some sort of inside baseball on what it's like to work there. I can tell you that while I've had nothing to do with the hiring at our franchise locations at Pepper Lunch, I'm really impressed with our franchisees, because they have very high long-term retention. And when I ask those employees, why have you been here for 2 years? Why, we're talking about college age for the most part. Why have you been here for 2 or 3 years? Some of them have been there for 5 years. But even the ones that are just there a year and a half, 2.5 years, and I've seen some of them switch between stores. I'm like, you moved, and when you moved, you made sure you could work at a Pepper Lunch when you moved. Like, that was really interesting.
Yeah. Why?
And yeah, the answers are why. Questions are why, and it just comes down to, I'm paid well, I'm respected, I get to work in all aspects of the business because we have cross training among all the stations. I really enjoy the other people I work with is one of the biggest answers. There's a camaraderie, there's a relationship there. There's everybody's rowing in the same direction to the same goal, and yeah, I mean, those are some of the factors that I think you're talking about that are incredibly important. Um, yeah, that everybody needs. It's really old fashioned sounding. It's not very new and innovative and sexy sounding like your technology is, but at the same time, it's what works, right?
But it's spot on because essentially what you're doing. Think of the workforce as customers, right? What we're doing is we're finding you your workforce. So it's so specific. Like, let's say we work with some really fun coffee concepts, right? In that messaging, we've actually when we're reaching out to these candidates, we'd say no grills, no fryers, your hair won't smell, and
Yeah,
it works, right? We work with vegan concepts, and some of these concepts really like the fact that their employees are vegan by choice, right? Because they are passionate about the
Yep.
concept that they're working at, and it goes back to the first question you asked me, right? How can you be hospitable if you really don't buy into a concept? So, and that's when you have higher retention. That's when your AUVs go up, right? Because I mean, if I had to sell you chicken tikka masala, there's no one going to be better at selling chicken tikka masala than me, right? But I I will not be able to sell you Wiener Schnitzel, right? Because I have no
Right.
idea what it is. So um, that's what I think is really fundamental today.
Yeah, I think that's really poignant. People find their tribe, right? So
Hmm.
what you're really trying to do is demonstrate who the tribe is, like broadcast the culture, broadcast the belief system, broadcast the values, broadcast whatever the personality of the brand is. And we're going to talk about that next is, how do you get that message out there beyond the referral from an existing employee, right? That sort of small network, we have 15 to 18 employees at a pepper lunch store. At some point you exhaust their network, right? They've reached out to everybody, and so you have to be able to go wider than that. So let's use this opportunity to talk about Landed. What is Landed? And then let's get into some of the unique aspects of the technology and how it works for brands when they're utilizing it.
Yeah, sure. So 30,000 foot view on land, it essentially is we find you talent, we engage them, vet them, and then we'll book them in for interview on your behalf at the store, right? With the kicker that we get them to actually show up for the interviews that we book them in for, right? And the way that we do it is, apart from integrating with, your regular job boards like Indeed and Zip and the hundreds out there, we also on your behalf use the power of social media to find you that hourly talent, right? I mentioned this just a few minutes ago, right? You're one of the few, CEOs of companies that use the power of social to get out there, and that's we're the only company that does that. So we post on your behalf to like Snap and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and that's where we find that millennial and Gen Z talent that isn't coming on to those job boards as much anymore, right? On an average, another fun stat, on an average, an hourly worker today holds 2.1 jobs, which means that when they're looking for their second or their third gig, right? Sometimes you just want weekend shifts or they just want evening shifts. And as employers, that's what we're looking for a bunch of times. So we're digging into something known as the hidden job market to bring in and widen your net, to bring in that talent, right? So that's the first part. And I hope that answers your question. That's what we do to
Yeah.
find you that talent.
Yeah, but talk a little bit about, before we came on, you kind of shared with me about the generative AI piece of the technology, and I had an understanding because of something else that I've been working on for Pepper Lunch is the ability to sort of speak in the voice of the brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
To not just be a generic post, looking for cashier, blah, 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 restaurant, blah, 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 hours,
Yep.
very lots of that out there, right? Lots of those generic posts, and you don't really get to express what the brand is all about. And I love your example of, your hair won't smell or your clothes won't smell. Similarly, you could talk about sort of the gig economy. Hey, just need 2 hours, 3 days a week. We got you. We need that too. Let's do this together, kind of a thing. There's ways to sort of express that with a brand persona. Talk about how you put that out on the street and in the airwaves.
Yeah, sure. So essentially what we're doing is we reach out to candidates as soon as they apply for a job. I mentioned this, that one of the largest problems today is speed, right? Because if we aren't going in fast enough, you're gonna be scraping, bottom of barrel in terms of quality, or you're gonna get ghosted. So we start texting with these candidates as soon as they apply, and then we use AI to engage with them and vet them. So let's think of this in this way that we understand your need to haves and your good to haves. And before that, we understand the voice of your brand, right? So you could be, full service on Michelin and we can put on that more formal voice, right? Versus you can be, young and, fun and edgy and we can pick up the terms that you like to use and put that on the voice when we're texting with these candidates. And while we're doing that, we understand your need to haves, which would be, let's say basic stuff, right? Minimum age, reliable transportation, stuff like that. But then we can vet for your good to haves. So let's say you're okay with, a team member that's had less experience, but you want them to have a great personality. So we can actually vet for those things using AI. Another fun stat. Enthusiasm is directly related to retention. The candidates that show higher enthusiasm are 35% more likely to be retained at a store. So one of the things that we can do is we can vet for enthusiasm, right? So if I ask you a question, hey, why do you want to work at Pepper? And your response is, I just need a paycheck. There's a higher probability that you'll be shortlisted for the next question if you're more enthusiastic. I love your guys' food. I love everything hospitality that comes from Japan. Whatever your answers are, like as long as you show us that enthusiasm, we can actually vet and set up for the next question. So that's where we're also saving operators a lot of costs because retention is one of the largest problems in our industry today. So that's where we use AI to imagine giving every single one of your locations a dedicated recruiter, right? Who's doing this 24/7 real time. And you're using that to bring in the workers that want to work for you or with your brand.
I'm going to take it to the next level, scare the heck out of my colleagues out there. You shared with me before we came on a couple of stats that I think were really eye-opening for me. The average applicant applies to 14 jobs per session, but they push the button, and that
so
the majority of
a session is defined as like one sitting, right?
Yeah.
So on an average, they
one search.
Exactly. So they sit on an average time for like a job posting is about 28 minutes, and they apply to about 14 jobs in that 128-minute session.
And they, on average, majority of them take the first job they're offered.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said about speed, and the next stat that was really interesting is that a big percentage of them apply between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m.
Yep.
So if you're not automated in this process, if your brand isn't able to express its personality, if you aren't able to give enough information to an applicant to not only get them excited about working with you, but be willing to go through that process, and that process isn't like very refined, very efficient, very technologically forward, because that's who Gen Z is. They're digital natives, right? They grew up with a phone in their hand. My 3.5-year-old son can operate almost any piece of technology we have in the house, especially a phone. He can definitely navigate around a phone. You're way behind at this point, right? I mean, at this point, this is table stakes, and then the nuances of the variation between how you make that connection, how you share that information, how easy you make it, right? I think the texting thing is huge, is a differentiator that really actually matters when it comes to getting the best candidates because of the speed aspect.
If you think of it again from statistically, right, the best retention generally comes in for stores that are owner operator led, right? Onesie, twosie units or family run businesses, because that's where the hospitality for your team comes in. But if you're going to scale, it's impossible for GMs to do it. So the only two options that are left is, the next option is, all right, then you get a chatbot. But what happens with that is it's unidirectional, right? What's your first name? What's your last name? If you go and say, hey, what's the pay? You're not going to get a response, right? It's a chatbot. Versus what we do that makes it authentic is you can go and say, hey, do I need to wear uniforms? Will I get a uniform? Or, what I can do weekends. Do you have weekday shifts? That's what a conversation is like. And doing that between 10 to 1 is going to make sure that you get booked for an interview the next day. And then you get text message reminders the night before and the day off. So when you show up, you're like, dang, this is a fun place to work. They really want me here.
And they're on it, right? Like the candidate sees it as you have invested in this process. You have made this easy for me. That's sort of the Gen Z mindset is, are you working within my framework, right? Do you understand me as the type of human that I am, right? I think that's it is what it is. We have to speak to the people that we're trying to attract in their way, on their systems, in their format, right? Just because I'm not raising a Gen Z and don't understand them doesn't mean I don't have to understand them, because I need them, right? We have to have them. So so we have to put in the time and effort, and companies like yours have done that work and made that easy. Let's move towards the wrapping up of this conversation. Give me the 30-second elevator pitch on what Landed does for restaurant brands, and how you're different. And then I've got a few of those fun questions at the end for you as well.
Oh, no. All right. Okay, cool. So essentially what Landed does is we find you hourly talent, we book them in, get them to show up for interviews, and we help you on your hiring process, right? And this is done in a high touch, highly personalized environment where you get to, have the brightest minds in the industry working at the back end and meeting with you on a weekly basis. So that's what Landed does.
Very good. Well done. Here's some fun questions.
All right.
What was the best meal you've had in the last 60 days? And you can't say mama's cooking.
Oh, fuck. All right.
I took the easy one away.
All right. Fantastico Pizza. Cheryl owns a pizzeria right opposite my house. She spent some time in La Cordon Bleu. She has her own mother yeast. She makes the best pizza in the entire of Toronto and is Toronto's best known secret.
Oh my God. I have got to get up to Toronto soon. I love good pizza and I love fanatical pizza makers. That's awesome. What was the last concert you went to?
Hassan Minaj. It was a comedy show, so I know if that counts.
Yeah, it counts. Sure.
All right, Hassan Minaj.
Nice.
Yeah, I think about a month and a half ago.
Oh, fantastic. That's a lot of fun. And then I'm going to throw a question at you that you threw at me because you're in Toronto. Yeah, but you're in Toronto. We want to know. I don't want to know what your answer is because I've spent some time there. And I'll stick it with fast casual, but what is currently your favorite go-to, gotta have fast casual concept?
It's not going to change. It's not Toronto, but it's Kava. I mean,
Okay.
I'm in New York about 3-4 times a month. So Kava
Okay.
is we do also work with every single one of their locations. But this is not a biased answer by any chance.
Yeah.
I love their food. I was born and raised in Dubai, so I obviously have a large bias for Mediterranean food. So Kava all the way.
Bonus add on to that is you kind of said the food. I mean, the food's table stakes. It's great, but what is it about Kava as a brand that resonates with you? I'm fascinated with the Kava story and the Kava growth trajectory and how early they IPO'd, so to speak, compared and what size business they were when they did that. So I'm really just curious when people share their affinity for Kava. I'm curious what else about Kava is really makes it the whole package for you.
Okay, so there's a sense of bias, and this is a longer story because the last startup that I was building, I had to be in New York about 4 to 6 times a month.
Wow.
And all my meetings were in Midtown.
That's called living there, just so you know, Rouhaan.
Yeah, and we pay much higher taxes up here. So
Yeah.
it was all my meetings were in Midtown, and I just wanted to eat healthy food fast in between my meetings. And the sense of, first of all, Kava is really dense around Midtown.
Yeah.
So, the sense of familiarity, the sense of having a consistent product, of knowing what you want when you want it, and being able to get out in under 15 minutes, right? So it just checked all the boxes, given food was constant.
That's amazing. That's a great answer. It speaks a lot to what you should be focusing on as a brand, as a multi-unit operator, as a franchisee, as a restaurant operator, brand. If you're creating something, consistent expectation is met every time with that consistency of food, service, speed,
Yeah.
price, predictability, right?
Hmm.
Quality, obviously, a lot of choice there, right? Self-directed, build your own environment, which can be done very efficiently, very quickly. And then I assume price either didn't matter because it met so many other things, or hey, this is something I can actually afford to eat 3 days a week when running between meetings or whatnot. So whether price, whatever percentage, I think we overvalue price
Yeah,
in
and the
its
prices
value.
matter for me.
Yeah.
It's about eating healthy, getting out of the restaurant fast is
Yep.
what, just knowing what you had or didn't have to, use no decision fatigue because you're just tired. You just want to
Yeah.
eat and move, right? So, Price, yeah, surprisingly was not, but that's not me on a daily basis, right? As a consumer, price matters to me, but not in that specific case.
That's great. And by the way, Rouhaan, that was our first sort of bonus question because you hit a nerve, and I wanted to dig in a little deeper and go a couple minutes over to illuminate that because I think that's important for the audience to hear and think about in their business. Rouhaan, how do we get a hold of you? How do we find Landed? How do we learn about what Landed can do for our business? Share that contact info so everybody can find you easy.
Yeah, sure. Rouhaan, Rouhaan at gotlanded.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Rouhaan Shahpurwala. But Troy, thank you for this. This was a fun conversation. It's the first time that I have been on a podcast. So it's a first for me too.
That's awesome. I'm glad to have been your first podcast. You'll only get and enjoy it, get better and enjoy it more every time. But you were a phenomenal guest. Nobody would know this is your first guest appearance on a podcast. And we were very happy to have you here on the Pineapple Perspective, and look forward to watching your growth and learning more about Landed as we get to know each other in the industry.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Great to have you. Thank you for listening to the Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.